Okay, now we are. This lets you.
Okay.
Okay, your session is on the treasurer. Treasurer was the first office I held. I've been fortunate to have extremely well-supported employers. The first job I had when I came down here, I started to work in March. The reason I got the job is because I could take shorthand. The first meeting I went to for the chapter was in March. Election was in April. I was elected as treasurer in April. And I have run for office and served on all the committees since then. But it's because we were talking about earlier, bring someone from the office or encourage people. I didn't have a choice. I was told I was going to this meeting, and I went to that meeting, and I was told that I was going to run for an office. But it was because I thought, well, maybe this is something I want to do. So this is what I did. And so treasurer was the first office I ever held in the association, and it was on the local level. But the treasurer is the financial advisor to the association and custodian of all the funds. All the funds are supposed to be deposited. They're supposed to have support when you write a check, when anything is reimbursed. And eventually, the treasurer is audited to make sure not that the treasurer did anything wrong, but to make sure that your ledgers are appropriate according to your budget. And that is because when you do your budget, you want to make sure you have enough funds allocated for each subject and each item. And you do that based on the prior year's expenditures. And it's always helpful to know what you did spend, what was left over, what was overspent, so that you can adjust the budget when that time comes. The treasurer should always be bonded. The association should pay for that bond. Also, there are some areas where they say the president should be bonded. Usually they require 2 signatures at the bank. Sometimes they require 3. It's noted that the treasurer, the president, sometimes the president-elect or the vice president, or sometimes the secretary, are the ones that are allocated the signatures on the check. Sometimes the check has to be signed by both, or at least 2 signatures on the check, depending on the bank. Sometimes you can have just one. You should be able to furnish a report at every meeting. If it's on the local level, it would be monthly or whenever you have your meetings. On the state level, it's whenever you have a meeting. You should always start off with a beginning balance with all the deposits, and then list all the disbursements and have an ending balance. Periodically, you should be asking for the member roster from now so that you can keep up with the members that you have, and that you can supply that information whenever anybody requests that information. At the end of the year, you should have a final accounting. It should start out with the beginning of your audited balance from what you started out with. You should list all the deposits, you should list all the disbursements, and have an ending balance. Towards the end of your fiscal year, you should be asking everyone that has anything that they need to be reimbursed for to submit that to you. Most chapters and the state association have what they call a check request now. You can complete that check request. We always request supporting document like whether it's a receipt or a letter that you've gotten that has the amount requested in it, to go with that check request, because the treasurer needs that support, because when they're audited, they want to make sure that it's proper. If it's a budgeted item, I don't believe that you need approval up to the point of whatever the budget is. If it's over the budget, you need to have approval from your membership for that.
And that is before you write a check.
So, the report is always filed subject to audit. It's not like it's the final review at that particular meeting. You usually state, the president states that it's filed subject to audit, because it is audited at the end of the year. You are supposed to maintain ledgers. You should have a ledger for each budgeted item. Now they have so many different types of accounting procedures. Back when I did it, we had little ledger cards and a ledger spreadsheet. So we had to keep up with the cards, and then we had to put it on the ledger sheet, and then we had to type up the report. Now, I believe that, I don't do any accounting online, but I believe there's so many programs now that you can enter it in, and it can even print out your report for you based on the information that you put in.
Can we have a show of hands how many treasurers are present today? Actual office, on a local level as well? How many have served as a treasurer? How many of you keep your personal checkbook? Do you balance it each month when your bank statement comes in?
I balance it 3 or 4 times a month. Daily.
That is number one importance, serving as a treasurer. When that bank statement comes in, you should reconcile it with your checkbook to make sure you balance. Sometimes you will have an instance where, oops, something's not right. Take time to find out what it is before you get in the hole and can't find it. Treasurer's reports can be amended should you find a discrepancy. It's always important to make it on the record what report was wrong, what the correction is, and it's easier on your audit committee as well.
When you balance the bank statement to your records, the banks provide a worksheet that's very simple to follow, where it has your starting balance, then it has a place for you to list any deposits that are not reflected on your bank statement, and then you'll calculate what that amount is, and then go back down and put in what expenses, what checks have been written that have not cleared the bank, and deduct that, and that should be the same balance as you have in your checkbook. It's not a hard process, but it's something that needs to be done, and it needs to be done in writing, because when it's time for the financial review, the person who's doing the financial review needs to be able to look at the bank statements and verify against the written reconciliation form. I have done some financial reviews where there was no written reconciliation of the bank statements. And in order for me to be able to complete the review, I had to go through each bank statement and catch that up in order to make sure that everything was in place. And of course it was. You know, it wasn't like the treasurer was trying to do anything, wrong. It's just that they didn't provide enough documentation to be able to do that review without putting in a lot of work on it. And we need to remember that, it's not just us, but anyone in the association, not just you as treasurer, but anyone in the association should be able to look at the books at any time, because it's, the membership is what the association is about, and members have a right to be able to go in and look at the financial accounting of the association.
And as Billie was saying, there are numerous electronic accounting systems available, such as QuickBooks and such as that. But keep in mind, if that is on your computer, you should always keep out a printed copy and update it periodically, because you never know when a system will crash, you never know when you will change jobs. Something might happen to you personally. The association would still have access to its records, even though you're not there to provide a password to the system. There are several examples in here. I'm not going to waste your time going through, but we put together a little packet here showing, starting off with the budget. The treasurer usually receives a proposed budget from her predecessor. You take it, you work with your executive committee and work out a budget, and then you will take and give it to all the officers and all the members at the meeting. You will note that we did a example here. Your total income should equal your total expenses. And then when you're keeping your general ledger, you record each transaction. You can do it two different ways. Some of us from the old school do debit and credit. I have seen several new treasurers come in simply with income and expenses. But remember, there's always a plus and there's always a minus. And cash is the one that's always minus whenever you write the check. So there's a debit and a credit. You have to post it to your other ledger the opposite way. Some people just keep a running balance and do plus, minus, or whatever. It's a good idea to start off when your budget has been approved. Each individual ledger will specify what amount is budgeted for that account, such as the award of excellence. You see that you have a $50 beginning balance. Well, then you know if the award purchase is $50, you have nothing left in that account. Should that chairperson submit to you a receipt and wants you to write them a check for $65, you cannot do so without obtaining approval for an overage. Sometimes you will have to where, like on seminar, most of the time on the state association, that will all be income. Sometimes you will have to write back checks to individual members who've had to cancel for some reason or another, or you might have to advance funds for a speaker gift. At least then you know what you're working with and if you have funds available for that. There are a couple of examples of a budget.
Whenever you have an overage, and let's say you said $65, it's an overage of $15, do you state what category that overage comes out of?
Yes.
Like you're taking the $15 out of the seminar fee instead of?
No, you do not take from one to the other. Say like Award of Excellence, you have a set amount of $50 for that budget, but you've got an expenditure for $65, you will have to obtain approval of $15 overage on that particular account. You do not take it from anywhere else, but it will be ratified in your minutes. That's why it's important to get that from your secretary to keep with your records. Note on your ledger that this overage was approved at the May 15th meeting, so that when that audit committee is doing their paper trail, looking at your checks and balances, it shows that that has been approved. And it's not so much, like Billie was saying, checking the treasurer as it is keeping an accurate record of what's being spent on individual things. Because next year, they may want to increase that budget if we keep going over. Why have it low if you're gonna have to have an overage each time? Or it may be that, you know, we need to look for another place to get it if it keeps going up.
Another thing the treasurer has to do is they have to make sure they file that 990N form. If it's not filed, it could cause a problem for NOWs, because that's what affects the nonprofit status of NOWs in our state association, in our local chapter. I think we have discussed that on the state level in the past, and I believe all the treasurers were instructed to try to do that at the fiscal year, at the end of the fiscal year, even though the actual deadline is September the 15th. Our fiscal year for the state association in most chapters are from April the 1st to May 1st through April 30th. And so at the annual meeting, I believe they discussed that we would remind every treasurer at that point in time to start working on getting the 990N filed. You have to file it with NOWs, not only with the IRS, you have to file it with NOWs, you need to file it with the president, and you need to file it with the secretary. The treasurer, the state treasurer needs to remind every chapter treasurer that it's due, and then the chapter treasurer needs to file it, notify its president, its secretary, and notify the treasurer of the state association, so the state association can notify NOWs. And like I said, it affects the status, the nonprofit status of NOWs, so it's very important that that get filed. They get the membership dues, and therefore, usually when you get the membership dues, it tells you who the member has paid for that, and that's why it's sometimes easier to ask NOWs for the roster, so you can make sure that you've gotten the dues, renewals, or whatever for each of the members. Because sometimes the members may get the renewal dues and they set it aside or forget about it, and the next thing you know, their dues have not been paid. And as treasurer, you can remind that member that their dues have not been paid, so that we can find out if they're going to renew or if they're not going to renew. It also gives you new members. Sometimes there'll be someone that will send in an application that you don't know anything about. They just send it straight to NOWs. And you find out that you have a member in your chapter that you didn't realize you had a member. Or you have a member at large on the state level that you didn't realize that you had. So that's why it's important to continue with the rosters, asking for the rosters, because it gives you more information. And I think when they send you notice that a certain person is paid for the dues.
Billie, wouldn't it be advisable for the treasurer to also provide that information about if there is a member that they note has not renewed, provide that to the membership chairman, the vice president, so the membership chairman can also follow up about a non-renewal and an encouragement to renew?
Yes, it would. That way the vice president or whoever is in charge of the membership can contact them some kind of way and find out why they're not renewing, or if they're a brand new member, they can send them a welcome letter. So that would be good.
And that's something else the treasurer can do on their report. When you're listing on your monthly report or quarterly report on the state level, when you put that date of deposit as dues, put just the last names on there so that people can see, okay, the chapter got my dues. And that, checks and balances for themselves as well, because sometimes things get lost in the mail. You mailed in your payment, Nows didn't get it, so therefore our chapter never received, the local payment from Nows. I put an example in here of a treasurer's report, but I didn't put any line items on there. Most of you can see from the little ledger sheets on here, all of those should be listed on your treasurer's report anytime you have income or checks written. Put the person's name on there for a check, like check number 121 would have been to Billie Ruddick for the Award of Excellence plaque. If that's on my treasurer's report, then the audit committee can look back on the general ledger sheet for Award of Excellence and see that, okay, yes, that was paid out. Treasurers can also be asked by chairman, how much money do I have left? Membership chair may be trying to put together a function, but they've used a little bit here and a little bit there, but don't remember how much money they have left to utilize throughout the year. Email or phone call might be received, so you've got to have access to this to be able to timely get back to them. The president or any other member of the EC may ask to review your books. They don't have to wait till year end for an audit. It doesn't matter, they don't have to give a reason, but they can ask to review them at any time. The treasurer does not have the right to decline that request.
And they shouldn't take it personally.
No, because it could be that something has happened at a local bank and they just need to verify that we're not having any issues. Any number of reasons. But the treasurer is only a keeper of the books. It's not my money. So I am to report to you how much money you actually have in there and where it's all going.
It talks about a surplus of funds. I know many years ago our state association had a separate account for savings. We had, at one point in time, we had about 15 chapters in the state association. When a chapter dissolves or turns in its charter, if they have any funds in their treasurer, that money is supposed to go to the state. This is a while back. The money went to the state, and the state used that money for scholarship purposes at one point in time. Since that point in time, I haven't been treasurer or not on the state level, and I don't believe that is what they do anymore, and I don't know if that's where that surplus savings account thing came from, but there is something in the bylaws or at NOWS that states if there are any funds left in the treasurer of a dissolved chapter, they are supposed to do something with those funds, whether it goes to the state or where, I'm not sure. It may go to NOWS now.
Having recently experienced this, I can tell you where the funds are supposed to go. Of course, they prefer you send them to the House Foundation. They must be given to a 501c3 charity, not a charitable designation. If you choose not to give it to the NOWS Foundation and you choose to give it to the Red Cross, you have to provide, well, the Red Cross is a well-known. If you give it to the Mississippi Juvenile Diabetes Foundation, you have to provide documentation from that association that you propose to give the money to. showing their qualified status as a 501c3 charitable organization or charity, and give that information to NOWS to approve them to give your money to them instead of the foundation.
I wasn't sure, I saw that in this report, and I didn't get a chance to look that up, but, like I said, years ago, we were allowed to open up a savings account and utilize it for scholarship funds. But now, we know that it either has to go to NOWS or to a charitable place. Also attached to this report is a copy of audit committee, and it came from our local chapter. It's, if you're not real sure how to do an audit of your treasurer's report, your treasurer at the end of the year on the local level, it's pretty much the same way on the state level. We've been fortunate to have someone that does audits, Sue Allman, who has really done most of the audits of our state association in the past few years. But it tells you exactly what you're supposed to do on this particular form. It works, and it works very well. So, and like I said, any discrepancies or anything like that, it's not a reflection on the treasurer. It's a reflection that sometimes you're confused about exactly what ledger you're supposed to be putting these particular budgeted items. Sometimes you might consider it a miscellaneous item, and someone else might say, well, you spent it for office supplies. So does it go under committee office supplies? Does it go under officer supplies? But the treasurer just put it under miscellaneous because they were not sure at that point in time. So that's usually what your discrepancies are in that. And then basically, I don't know of any treasurer we've had that has been, a bad treasurer. They just sometimes don't have things in the proper place. That's human. So,
I'd just like to point out that as the treasurer, it's your responsibility to deposit your receipts in a timely manner, because it's hard for your members if you're holding checks for months on end. And according to the Manual of Policies and Procedures, that should be done within 5 business days of when the money is received.
I can vouch for that personally. I wrote a check several years ago to the state and I don't use a checkbook. I just have a checking account, and I never look at it because I know I have a balance, and I try not to ever go below that balance. And when I look at it, that's it. I don't pay attention to it. I didn't pay attention to that. The check never got deposited. I changed bank accounts. So I had to come back up with that money because I closed that account and I actually spent that money, I guess, because it didn't clear the bank and they never found that check. But when I closed out the account, I had to write another check. In essence, I didn't really lose the money. It's just that I thought I had all this extra money, and I really didn't have this extra money. So, and that happened to me again not too long ago, where I had to change the bank account, and I had to call and say, I have a check that's outstanding. This time I look at it more now than I used to. I said, I have a check that's outstanding, and I had to close my account. So, if you haven't deposited, don't deposit it, and I'll give you cash when I see you the next time. So, it is very important that you go ahead and deposit checks as soon as you get those. A lot of times, if you get advertisers that send you money for different things, they too expect you to go ahead and deposit that check right away.
It's good business.
So that is very important. So, treasurer is not the easiest job. It's one of the most responsible jobs, because you are handling the funds of your members, and your members trust you to take care of business, financial business. Any questions?
Nancy?
Not a question, but the terms financial review and audit have been used interchangeably, and just as a point for anybody that doesn't know, an audit would be by an actual CPA. If we're not using a CPA, then it's called a financial review, just for clarification. Not a question either, but a comment. I've never served as treasurer on any level, but I have served as part of the audit committee on the state level and several times on the local level. I've seen some horror stories in the books that were kept in the past, and I would just like to remind everyone that that auditor, the only thing they have to go by is what you have written in those books and those ledgers. If you're doing a split entry, make sure that you keep track of every ledger that it should go into or come out of, and keep a complete record. And like Billie said, please, or Theresa said, please make sure that you do a reconciliation monthly. Because if there's something that is not caught, then it's going to carry on and carry on and carry on and carry on, and it makes a difference in the end. Let me tell you what, Henrietta Carana, she keeps the best books that you can even imagine, but even in her records, there was a mistake that I found, and so anybody can make a mistake, but it's important that you catch it early on.
And sometimes it's the bank that makes the mistake.
That's very
I
true.
also served as treasurer for Ladies Auxiliary at church, and I had a president who made 2 deposits when I was unavailable and told me the amounts. I never saw them show up on the bank statement. Come to find out, the bank had deposited it to someone else's account. So it's important that you work together and keep good records, because you never know when you have to look back.
And sometimes it's difficult to know which particular category something needs to be posted in. Just ask some of the other past treasurer, or ask your president, or don't just try to guess which category it goes to if you're not sure. That's something else. Sometimes they get in the wrong.
Our books are a lot easier now than what they used to be. I see from reports that not nearly many checks are written as we once used to do. Because I remember when we would have a 3-page treasurer's report for the state association. And now it's pretty much warmer.
I just wanted to add that I did work as treasurer, and I enjoyed it very much. I've only done that once, but one thing I would note too is it's very important to have the minutes, because a lot of times when script tickets are approved, of course they're approved in a certain amount. So someone may not be attending a seminar or a certain dinner, and you'll have script tickets in different amounts. Sometimes the association will say, well, we're not going to pay for a certain thing. And if someone didn't hear that or didn't know, they'll fill out a script ticket asking for too much money. So you need to be aware as the treasurer of what was actually approved to be spent for certain functions. And that's one thing that, I had trouble with sometimes, looking back and figuring out what was approved and what I could write the checks for. And that was confusing for me the first time, just, instead of just blindly writing checks, learning to look back and see what we approved and what it was gonna be under.
And that's where your check request form comes in handy too. Most of them have on here what account to charge it to. Well, read that carefully because somebody may have the wrong one on there. It may be a particular line item budget, or it could be a general thing. So if it's incorrect on their check request, just make note of it, and when you post it correctly.
And make sure they do their math properly, because I had that a couple times too, where I went by that final number and didn't double check the math, and then you're trying to make this number fit something, but they didn't do their math correctly.
And when you do the check request, if you're not sure what the budgeted item is, you can just put an explanation down there. It's, I purchased such and such for such and such, and then the treasurer can ask you exactly if they need more information, or the treasurer can then find out where it's gonna go. Because sometimes the member does, they know they've got to go purchase something, but they're not sure where it's supposed to go. But as long as they tell them why they bought it or what they got it for, then the treasurer usually can answer that.
And one check can cover 2 budgeted items, and just make sure it's listed separately on the individual ledgers and on your check request here.
And if this check request was given to the treasurer, written in the handwriting of the committee chair or the officer, and you've decided that that budget category that they have listed is not where it's gonna be posted, and you said make a note where you're really posting it, would the treasurer need to initial that so that they know that was an intentional change and that that's gonna be what's reflected in her books?
Remember, you need documentation support always for everything. And I know a lot of chapters are beginning to use debit cards, or debit, I guess you call them debit cards, debit entries. You still have to get a receipt for that. You still have to have some kind of documentation for that. When they get the bank statement, of course, it'll automatically be on there, so the treasurer's gonna be, and you need to let the treasurer know that you're requesting it, or tell the treasurer that you are fixing to purchase something for a certain item, but they want you to use a debit card, and the treasurer or whoever is the signature on that card, on the checkbook, they're the ones that's gonna have to go and do the debit card. Every once in a while, if a member has to have it, if it's that important, the membership should know that the treasurer is giving the debit card to so-and-so. That particular member is responsible for every charge, no matter what happened during that period of time while the member had it.
Not good practice to get into, just,
I'm just curious, when a debit card is used, is the check request done for that?
It should be,
Okay.
because you're using that
Because I've
debit
never
card
used it.
as if you're writing the check.
I know, it's the same as a check.
So there should be a check request form submitted for each entry,
And where it says check number, put debit card.
debit card, date, and detail. Does anyone have any questions so far as treasurer's reporting or requirements? Yes.
Is there any other information that's required to report to the IRS besides the 990N as the treasurer? Is that it?
That's it, one time a year. But our association could be audited at any time. And that's why it's important that we maintain records for at least 7 years. just as an individual who does tax returns. We don't have to do a tax return, thank goodness, because of that $9.99. I mean, that $9.90, and it's,
Did y'all talk about, being bonded?
Yeah.
Okay, I missed that part. Sorry. I don't know where I was. I was at the beginning.
A lot of times when you buy a bond though, it's like for 3 years. I don't know if you can buy them for 1 year anymore, but if it's for 3 years, and it need to make sure that it's transferable from one treasurer to the next treasurer, and if the president is also included on it, that the people's names are transferred, and it's up to that treasurer to make sure that the next treasurer contacts the company to make sure all of that's transferred.
that's
It's a
another
3-year
important
bond.
things of your minutes. That copy of the minutes showing the election of new officers should go to your bonding company and to your bank.
It's a 3-year bond, but it's paid annually.
Okay.
And you should always provide your election of officers and your minutes to them so they know who all is covered under that new bond.
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you, Theresa and Billie, for that informative presentation.